¿Qué onda, carnal? Dice mi gente, la raza está abajo y tú estás indiferente. Prefieres cerrar los ojos, no vi nada. Estabas ocupado por andar en la tomada. Te gusta tirar el cruising todo el día, buscando a las mujeres como si el mundo acabaría. Pero no sabías que tú podías continuar tu educación para superarte en la vida. Hermano joven, levanta tu frente y siente el orgullo de ser un descendiente de los aztecas, los incas y los mayas. Ayúdame a pelear y vencer.
Think of other countries like Italy and Greece and China and Turkey and places like that. They've all sort of changed over time. I mean, they've been there for millennia in many cases. And their culture has sort of evolved over time. But not us. We came here and created a blank slate. We birthed a nation. From nothing. I mean, there's nothing here. I mean, yes, we have Native Americans, but candidly, that there isn't much Native American culture in American culture. It was born of the people who came here pursuing religious liberty to practice their faith, to live as they ought to live, and have the freedom to do so. Religious liberty. Those are the two bulwarks of America. Faith and freedom.
Antonio Díaz con su programa otra vez de Mestizo Experience. Como saben, este programa es bilingüe y siempre hablo sobre temas afectando a la gente indígena en global, nacional, estatal, local, asuntos que tocan las vidas de nuestra gente aquí. And as you know, this program is bilingual, and from time to time, I will even speak some Nahuatl, so it's trilingual if you want to say that. And we are just back from having been, I guess, I don't know if you call it isolated, but kind of not on the air with the public because of COVID-19, which is still going on with the different variables, as we know. Dr. Fauci keeps on bringing up different incidences of COVID around the world, you know, how it's being treated, say, in the Middle East or in the Orient or here in our own continent, even though we kind of think that Mexico is separate from us, but it's not. Canada as well. There's a lot of different issues regarding being able to travel orders because of COVID still. But we're back on the air here in San Antonio. And aquí su servidor, Antonio Díaz, con su programa Mestizo Experience. We're back with Mestizo Experience. And just want to go over again what my program is about, since it's been gone for a while, but not gone. We've been having the reruns. But during the reruns, I don't know if you were watching some of the more local political issues that I take on, because I'm local here in San Antonio. But we're post the elections. We just have a new city council, some new city council representative. The mayor got reelected again. And so that city council is now established this month of June. And what we have in June, nationwide, because like I said, I was talking in terms of global or international or national, state, and local events and incidences. What we have nationally right now in June, of course, is Juneteenth. And the reason I speak of this is because I'm always talking about the injustice on this land, on our land, and injustices globally. And so Juneteenth is the celebration of emancipation from slavery of the African indigenous population that was imported here as slaves back, I guess, starting since 1619. And that's all our children, if they're allowed, because again, like I said, right now I'm talking statewide. I went from nation to statewide. Our governor here in Texas, which is, again, Juneteenth wasn't celebrated until 1865 in, I think, General Granger landed off of Galveston and started spreading the word. But emancipation had already happened 2 years prior, okay? and that's how backwards Texas is. But yet our governor today, now just last week, passed a law, that 1836 law, where we would only learn of events starting from 1836 onward, but not events of historical events such as affecting slavery or white supremacy, any of this injustices that is the actual foundation of the United States, or really a global colonization, right? Because the Europeans started colonizing Asia and the Middle East, Africa, and here, and we're still basically overthrowing that in one way or another, if not through an actual coup or violent takeover, military takeover, by simply waking up and having political influence enough to change the laws. But here in Texas, our governor says, we're going to take a step back. We're only going to recognize 1836 and the grandeur of Texas from there. Well, the grandeur of Texas from there, the Texas Republic, was slavery. Because you gotta understand, even Britain and what is the United States, since they're is the child, the United States is the child of Britain, just like Canada is, right? And all of which is Mexico on down, but part of it was still what is the United States. See, I go through all this through this real crash course of history. Spain, what was New Spain, ran all. Carolina is a Spanish name. Florida, Spanish name. Okay, all that was part of Spain until France and the U.S., what became the U.S., started having military conflict, war with Spain and taking over different parts of it, and Spain signing agreements. Even though all this, again, is going on in a populated country, nation, land. Native people had different nations, tribes, but according to Europeans, they didn't respect them because they didn't have the same social structures, right? Same infrastructure of the monarchies, their kings that were put in place by the Pope. All this is the foundation of all what I call occupier nations of this continent. And they're the ones that make the laws, well, the laws that benefit them. Because the laws, again, of slavery, declaring an African slave 3/5 of a human being, only so that those conservatives that believed in slavery could continue maintaining slavery, because giving a slave 3/5, this fraction, empowered them to have more representation in Congress. But since they owned the slaves voted the way that their masters told them. So, which meant slavery continued, right? Which led to the Civil War. Basically, it was a trade-off, because the northern states were outlawing or abolishing, what they call the abolitionists, were abolishing slavery. The southern states, which were barely still just moving native people, slaughtering native people, pushing them out, and creating a white-only governed, I don't know what you would call it, but they call it against nations and states, which is what Texas was, like that last bastion of white supremacy. Took over a large area, because Texas, Coahuila, Texas Texas once ran from the coast all the way up to Canada, right? Bexar County ran all the way up into Canada, which is why you have the Canadian River that comes into the Colorado Rio River. All this, what I teach you now, or what I'm telling you now, the governor doesn't want you to learn in school, because supposedly it causes some sort of strife, some sort of conflict, which they raise up to the level of hatred, right? I don't think so. I think we as a people should know our own history because globally it's known. Different countries around the world know the history of the United States and how it was founded. So it is kind of very ignorant on the part of the government to try to keep the population ignorant, right? To keep the children ignorant. If you have someone that becomes a successful person and travels abroad, and you might have someone from whatever other country asking him of the founding and of how their country started, and for that person to be a successful business person and be totally ignorant of how the founding of their country was, or get angry because they're told the truth, I think is very, very backward. But this is what this governor of our state, Greg Abbott, wants to do, and so, or has done basically with his legislation. But it can be overturned if we ever elect a governor that will want to move us into the 21st century instead of pushing us back into the 19th century. Wants to push us into the 19th century, but wants us to be happy about being pushed into the 19th century and not question, not argue, not say, well, was there ever such a thing as a Jim Crow law? And why did it exist? Was there a sundown law? And why did it exist? Or are you still going to try to bring up remnants of this legislation because you're bringing up 1836? You know, these sorts of things that empowered the white community over other ethnicities. And we had an ex-senator that was on CNN, Santorum, who was stupid enough to say that all this, the United States was created by the invasion of the British Judeo-Christians that started everything. Because according to him, there was nothing here. Nothing. So yes, there were some people, the Native Americans, but nothing. They didn't contribute anything. And of course, if you go by that sort of teaching and that mentality, all the children that come around will think that we never contributed nothing. Yet, everything that is grown here already was here already. It was not imported from Europe. It was not imported from Asia. It was not imported from Africa even. It was here already. Corn was started by the Mayans in Central America. Okay? The potato that saved Scotland or Ireland from dying from starvation, because those people mainly lived on potatoes, right? Because they hardly can grow anything. Well, again, that was from Peru, from Native Americans here. It wasn't imported here. It was exported from here. Chile, which, again, the Silk Road and all that, the Europeans trying to be able to get some seasoning to be able to preserve their meats or whatever, going into China and all. The Chinese were exporting Chile from here to Asia, from here to India, before they started growing their own, basically just creating their own from our native stock. These are just a couple. Aguacates, cacahuates, all these, and these are Nahuatl words. When you say them, you might say avocado, but it's aguacate. It's a native word. It's a Nahuatl word. Cacahuate, peanuts. That's a native word. Okay. All these are native foods grown here, not imported over here. Our people were growing this. So whenever they, I get a kick out of it, that all our native people want to accept that we were just hunter-gatherers. We never farmed until the white man taught us how to farm. That's a bunch of BS, okay? Yo siempre les digo, esa es mierda enlatada. Okay? In case let's see if you understand that. We were doing all this for hundreds, if not thousands of years, because the corn, it took a few hundred years, And we were eating it for thousands of years here before the Europeans arrived here. And the reason I can say that is because it started in Central America and got pushed all the way up into the East Coast. Native tribes were eating it and trading with it. And these are just a few of the items. Cotton, tobacco, all this was here already, which has become a major, again, product for the United States in manufacturing clothing and exporting tobacco products all around the world. But yet, Santorum wanted to say, Christians brought everything over here. There was nothing here at all. And I guess all the temples that they smashed, starting with the Spaniards again, because again, and I bring this up, slavery didn't start in 1619. Slavery started in 1492. And slavery didn't start by importing slaves. Slavery started by exporting native slaves to Europe. Our people, the Arawak, were basically decimated. Haiti, Cuba, you had native people there, okay? So to say slavery started in 1619, which is still very, horrible history, right? But we're not supposed to learn it anymore. Actual history, slavery started in 1492 when Columbus, maybe 1494, as soon as he went back to Spain and took native slaves over there. And it was under the same conditions as the African slaves that were imported over here, in very small compartments, tied down, not fed, dying on the trip or across the ocean, just being thrown over into the sea, dead. All this happened to our people. What Columbus did here, the beheading of innocent children, the raping of young girls, the burning of any chiefs or villages, chieftains that tried to fight back, all this, they would, and so when they talk about, if you want to talk about Santorum and Judeo-Christian beliefs or concepts, talk about all this. How the Catholic Church, the Catholic friars, and used to put those native people up in crosses and burn them if they were fighting back against the Spaniards. This was to teach them. This is how colonization happened, okay? It wasn't that they landed over here and our people were so happy and ignorant that they just said, oh, just go ahead and we want to adopt into your new religion, and oh, we bring us everything you have because we have nothing. We're starving to death. No. This was a very rich land to begin with, and it still is. But it wasn't all imported here from Europe. What was imported from here from Europe was slavery. Okay? Was genocide. And we need to talk about this. We need to educate ourselves. We need to educate our people of all the laws that came thereafter to still oppress us, to still suppress us. That's what needs to happen. We can't just say, well, we're happy now that we're participating in a capitalist system where we get to earn our money. We're no longer unpaid slaves. Today I say we are wage slaves. To still be getting such low wages in order to be able to just survive, and we're supposed to be happy about it, when we don't know our actual history and say, well, why is it that we keep on protecting the rich? Why is it that we think that maybe 1 out of 1 million of us will become the rich? So we have to keep protecting this foundation that was begun on the backs of innocent people that were enslaved. We need to know true history to be able to make these leaps and bounds that brings about equity, that brings about equality for all people. Because as long as someone has a foundation that's higher than yours and maintains it and tells you that it's equal because now you have the same opportunity as his people do, but they started up here and you're starting down here. And by the time you get here, you're basically just barely getting to where basically they started from. And that is the fight today, okay? Today, in the 21st century. That's our fight today. Still fighting for the civil rights that supposedly were won back in the late 60s, mid-60s. You start with emancipation, but then you go back because the whites started suppressing that, fighting that, stopping African Americans that were Americans by then, stopping them from getting elected into Congress, from being representatives of their own people. See, these are the things, the measures that we're taking when I'm talking about Jim Crow laws, sundown laws, all these different things that they were enacting still in the South to suppress. And it wasn't, as I said, slavery didn't start in 1619. That's when the importation by England and U.S., I guess, immigrants from England started importing African slaves into what it was, the 13 colonies that became the U.S. But slavery started in the 15th century with Columbus and his brothers, his nephews, all of them that were contracted by the King and Queen of Spain and by the Pope. That's when slavery started. And the war here in Texas, you want to bring up 1836, when this became a slave nation? Because you can see it in the preamble, the Constitution of the Texas Republic states it was begun to maintain slavery. Mexico, which had overthrown Spain, right? They had overthrown their European conqueror, their European mother country, just like the United States had overthrown England in 1776. So when Mexico did it in 1821, because it was a 10-year or 11-year war from 1810 to 1821 before Mexico won its independence. Texas, Coahuila was still a part of Mexico. Colorado, you name it, all the way up California, New Mexico, but that's when the Europeans, the white Europeans, were still moving west and south. They declared Texas a part of theirs, but it was because they wanted to maintain slavery in 1836, because Mexico was pressuring them by 1829 that they had already outlawed slavery in 1822. Okay? It didn't take a civil war. What it took was overthrowing their Spanish masters and then declaring slavery to be outlawed in 1822 by Vicente Guerrero, the second president of the Mexican Republic, who was Afro-indigenous. He had African blood and he had Native American blood from Mexico, which was why he enacted that law against slavery. Maybe you don't know that, and you'll never know that, because Governor Abbott doesn't want you to know that. But these are, if you want to celebrate 1836, then you're going to celebrate slavery, okay? You're celebrating Fiesta right now. You're not celebrating the heroes that were fighting against slavery. You're fighting the heroes that were fighting for slavery, to maintain slavery. Okay? And it's all about labor, again, which is why I say today we're just wage slaves. You know, stop saying, well, we're not going to pay you. Now they just say, we're going to pay you very little, because somehow it impacts the cost. It raises the cost of manufacturing, it raises the cost of transportation, it raises the cost of everything, right? If I give you another quarter or another 50 cents, whatever it may be that they're going to fight in Congress about to finally give to the everyday worker, right? Even though private companies, we know, they're not paying the $7.50, they're paying a little bit more because they're making so much more. And every time they want to, again, like I say, if they raise the price of refining oil, there, now you already raise the price of gas, which most of your products are transported by 18-wheeler trucks. So there you go. If they raise the price of coal, or then it goes the price of your, if they raise the price of this, and they're mining throughout, they're destroying so much, they're polluting the waters that we're drinking. And if you want to talk about Detroit, We're not supposed to talk about this, right? I talk about it. This is my first program back, and I'll be targeting a lot of these things more on a one-on-one item instead of doing what I did right now, which is just running from 1492, not 1619, 1492, when slavery begun, when the invasion of our continent, of our indigenous continent, began by the Europeans. And in 1619, when the U.S., and I'm saying this because, and in a lot, it's a misstatement, but against education is supposed to be based on ignorance, right? At least history, social studies, whatever, civics of the United States is supposed to be based on ignorance, not on actual factual history. Because if you ever attend Texas Board of Education meetings, their main concern is American exceptionalism and capitalism, okay? Just stand up there and put your hand up when you see the flag and salute it and make sure you know how to make a buck, and you're good. Who cares how it all started? And if you were part of your ancestors were part of the downtrodden, the enslaved, those that paid the high price for the white supremacists to get that leg up, to be supreme. See, all this is still, we're still fighting. We're still entrenched in this today. And politicians or elected officials like Greg Abbott and others, Dan Patrick and others here in Texas and around this nation that want to oppress and suppress, they were trying to stop, I think it's from the Department of the Interior, an indigenous woman, Helen, from New Mexico, from being placed in office by this new president, Joseph Biden. So again, to suppress it, because she's fought, as a Native person, she's fought for some of the things that I bring up, such as Indigenous Peoples Day, indigenous human rights, land rights. I talk about a lot about how we're one people. The occupied nations have divided our land and made different nations and made us have pride. It doesn't take long. I mean, how long did it take a slave person to accept slavery? One generation? You kill off the people that came from the homeland and how they grew up and the freedoms they had. You don't know anything else but living under foot. Nothing else but being a slave. As we that were brought up here by the Spaniards think that we're Spanish. And we protect the Catholic Church. We protect the Spanish language. We protect Spanish culture, when they're the ones that robbed us, indigenous people, of our culture. They're the ones that committed genocide against us. The Arawak were feeding their children poison by the thousands because they didn't want to be slaves to the Spaniards. None of this is supposed to be taught to us because they don't want us to hate the Europeans. Well, we didn't hate them back then. We just wanted to be free. We just wanted to be the masters of our own destiny on our own land. And that's what we need to strive for. Again, we don't need to hate anyone. What we need to do is have that knowledge of the past, of how great our ancestors were, of how they suffered, and how they fought to be free. We don't need to forget it, because that is the ultimate travesty. That is the ultimate act of genocide by these invaders against us. So we need to keep on speaking up. We need to keep on learning our true past, our true history, and keep moving forward. Not with hatred, but by being educated about our true history and our true contributions to all people. Antonio Díaz, su programa Mestizo Experience, Tlazocamati, Tosticate. Till next time.
¿Qué onda, carnal, dice mi gente, la raza está abajo y tú estás indiferente. Prefieres cerrar los ojos, no vi nada. Estabas ocupado por andar en la tomada. Te gusta tirar el cruising todo el día, buscando a las mujeres como si el mundo acabaría. Pero no sabías que tú podías continuar tu educación para superarte en la vida. Hermano joven, levanta tu frente y siente el